They want to be perceived as pro-Canada as much as they can. So the more centralist they become, the better. So there was no room for someone who was trying to build bridges with provincial parties to decentralize Canada when we have common goals. And that's for me where I want to go politically speaking.
Who do you see as, okay, so let's start on the provincial front. So again, for the international viewers, every Canada is made up of an assembly of provinces, and the political structure at the federal level tends to be somewhat mirrored at the provincial level. So there are federal, conservative, liberal, and socialist parties, and there are provincial, conservative, liberal, and socialist parties, and they're either tightly or loosely affiliated in the manner that Mr. Duhaime just mentioned. You're interested in coalition building at the provincial level on the conservative side, or with other perhaps interested in welcoming partners. Who do you see across the political landscape at the provincial level in Canada that you would regard as reasonable and probable allies with whom you could build a tighter confederation?
I don't think it's necessarily just personalities, or it's also provinces, because as we said earlier on, your home province is where you were born in Alberta. It's always been the province that has been asking for more power from Ottawa outside of Quebec. So they're natural allies on that front, and it was true even when René Lévesque was there, an old Quebec separatist premier. His best ally was Peter Lougheed at the time, the Alberta premier of the time. And it's always, when you look at it objectively, Alberta is probably the strongest ally of Quebec in terms of decentralization. And I'm a good friend of Jason Kenney, the current premier. Danielle Smith, who's running for the leadership of the party, is also a close friend. I've always had a lot of friends in Alberta among conservatives, and I think that the first province that is normally and historically an ally should be Alberta.
Well, it would be lovely to see that, speaking as an Albertan, and maybe I can do a little sideways move here. Canada is in a quandary like the rest of the world on the energy and environment front. And Quebec and Alberta have been at serious odds on that issue for the last decade, as well as Alberta and the federal government. And the chickens, in many ways, are coming home to roost. I mean, the German chancellor came to Canada a few weeks ago, cap in hand, and asked his old ally, the Canadians, for help with liquid natural gas provision, for example, to help reduce this catastrophic German dependence on Russian fossil fuel exports. And Trudeau basically sent him away empty-handed, stating in a manner so utterly preposterous that it's a form of idiot miracle that no business case could be made for Canada to export liquid natural gas to Europe, to Germany in particular. And that's so utterly preposterous because we have so much natural gas and we have the facilities to liquefy it. And the only reason a business case can't be made is because the federal Liberals have made it economically impossible for any actors to build the pipelines, for example, build the infrastructure and make this energy accessible. And so if you were leader of the provincial government in Quebec, what do you think you could do? What would you be inclined to do, let's say with Alberta and the rest of Canada to rectify that?
Well, the first thing regarding oil and gas, not a few days ago, I was in the Saguenay region, northeast of Quebec, to say that I'm the only political leader right now who's in favor of the LNG Quebec project, which is natural liquefied gas project, a $14 billion investment. Our Quebec government initially was in favor of it. Mr. Legault, the current premier, even met with the Alberta premier, and he was all in favor of it. And then a few environmentalists stood up in Montreal, and Mr. Legault flip-flopped and decided that now, he did even worse than that. He did adopt a bill 3 months ago to say that in Quebec it's forbidden to explore and exploit any kind of oil and gas. He went to the other extreme. He denied the rights of the companies who already had rights given by the Quebec government, and now we're sued. I mean, the Quebec government is sued for billions. I think it's $18 billion because we were denying rights of companies that were given by the government. So it's a real mess.
So he scuttled a $14 billion project,
Yeah.
and then accrued $18 billion in potential
Loss.
legal liability
Yeah.
to not produce fossil fuel.
Yeah. Just
Okay, so now I'm
look
gonna push
good,
you
to
on-
look good in front of the environmentalists. Let's put it that
I'm
way.
I'm gonna push you on that because it needs to be done. So I'm gonna be environmentalist here, and I'm going to say
Go ahead.
we need to transfer away from these despicable fossil fuels as rapidly as possible. There's going to be a substantial amount of economic disruption as a consequence. People are going to have to bear more costs on the energy front, but that's okay because they should be burning less fossil fuel anyways because of the liability accrued by the planet. These are necessary disruptions as we move toward a sustainable economy. And if a few eggs have to be broken to make an omelet, then c'est la vie. And so what do you think about that line of argumentation? How do you respond to it? How do you counter it? Do you accept it?
There's a few things we need to say. First off, our dependence on gas and oil is not going to stop tomorrow. The transition is going to take a few decades. Actually, we're even estimating right now that for gas, let's say, for the next 50 years, there's going to be a growth in terms of demand. So, yes, we're going to get out of it, but it's not going to happen overnight. It could happen in 5, 6, 7, 8 decades.
Okay, so I say, well, that's too long. We're going to be roasting in our oven-like homes in 10 years. We have to act more precipitously, and if it requires force and fear, so be it. So why is that a problematic argument if it is?
It doesn't make sense in my book, because what are you going to do in the meantime? Like tomorrow morning, we're 100% dependent right now in Quebec of oil and gas coming from outside, okay? And so if, and we saw what's happening in Western Europe right now because they were dependent of gas coming from Russia, and we see how it's a huge problem not to be autonomous in terms of energy. So are you proposing, and the parties are always good. Currently in Quebec, all the other political parties, they have goals, and they're promising that they're gonna cut our gas emission by 37.5%, 45%, 55%. It's like an auction to know which one is gonna have the highest percentage of cutting gas emission. But when you look at it, no one's ready to tell you how they're gonna do that.